Welcome, everybody. My name is Bronwyn Strong. I'm the program director for the Natural History Society of Maryland. We're so excited to see you all here this evening to learn about cicadas from the bug man, or the bug guy or the bug man, Mike?
Bug guy.
The bug guy.
Yeah.
And we're so glad that Dr. Mike Raupp from the University of Maryland Extension is back with us. He was here for Halloween and talked to us all about the funguses that turn insects into zombies, and that was great. And now we're going to learn about another part of insect life, and that's the cicadas, which are about to emerge. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Raupp now. Thank you so much for agreeing to come back and make us all smarter.
Oh my goodness, that's a very high standard, Bron, when you've set here. I'll do my best. I'm going to endeavor for that. But hey, I'm just going to tell you some bug stories, and I hope you have some fun this evening. So I am a professor emeritus at University of Maryland College Park. I've been there for, longer than I'd cared to share with you. But I work with landscapers. I work with the arboricultural industry, developing sustainable landscape programs that kind of reduce the reliance on chemical pesticides for managing insect and mites on woody plants. But the other big clientele groups I work with include the master gardeners, our wonderful adult volunteers, and also the adult volunteers in our master naturalist programs. I'm here to answer questions from the general public, is another piece of my fun existence. And tonight, hey, we're just going to share some bug stories about my spirit animal, the periodical cicadas. So with that, I'm going to give the share screen and we'll get started. Okay, let's see. I'm hoping that everybody is seeing a slide of a cicada or something like that, something close to that. Is that so?
Yes.
We're seeing the first slide with the cicada going on to the Washington.
Yes.
Oh, that is a rather large cicada, isn't it? Indeed. Okay, good. Well, we're all in the right place then, so we're good to go. Okay. What I will do before I get started with the presentation, I'm going to give a very shameful endorsement for my two blogs. My website is called Bug of the Week. Every week there is a new story about some bug I might have found crawling across the kitchen floor or out on my azaleas or perhaps up in an oak tree or somewhere along the C&O Canal over in Maryland. So please visit Bug of the Week occasionally and click on those videos and it will take you to my YouTube channel, YouTube Bug of the Week, where you can watch bugs doing buggy things. Okay, off we go. So we're going to take a little historical perspective first here on cicadas. We're going to walk through some of the very first records that I was able to find dating back to the second governor of the Massachusetts colony, about the time of William Bradford, who witnessed cicadas there in Massachusetts. A writing at that time basically said that all the month of May, there was such a quantity, a great sort of flies, like for bigness to wasps or bumblebees, which came out of holes in the ground and ate green things and made such a constant yelling noise as made all the woods ring of them and ready to deaf their hearers. So that was a quote from Bradford's time. We're going to fast forward a little bit to one of the very first published accounts in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. A great observer who hath lived long in New England did upon occasion relate to a friend of his in London, where he was, where he lately was, that some few years since there was such a swarm of a certain sort of insects in that colony that for the space of 200 miles they poisoned and destroyed all the trees of that county. They're being found in innumerable little holes in the ground, out of which those insects broke forth in the form of maggots, which turned into flies that had a kind of tail or sting, which they struck into the tree and thereby envenomed and killed it. Well, that might be a little bit over the top, I think. The first record I could find for my local friends here of cicadas in Maryland appeared a little bit later in 1751 in the Maryland Gazette. We're informed in some places that locusts have been found in great plenty just under the surface of the earth, almost at their full growth. Now, locusts. Locusts are grasshoppers, gang, right? Okay, so let's set that aside. How does locust come into use when we're referring to cicadas? And I still see journalists writing about the fact that locusts are going to appear this year. Well, if you hearken back to these times, understand that our early colonists were fleeing religious persecution from various parts of the world, Europe, and they saw these massive numbers of insects coming up and out of the ground. I think it must have reminded them of the 8th biblical plague, the plague of locusts, and they simply thought, oh my gosh, we're back in Egypt. These must be the locusts. Well, no, they're not really locusts. May God avert our impending calamities. Not locusts, cicadas. And cicadas really are far more closely related, as Bronwyn said, to things like aphids. They're essentially large sucking insects, fairly close relatives of the aphids. So what's the big deal here? Don't we see cicadas every year? Well, we do see cicadas every year, but the cicadas we see every year are what we call the dog day cicadas. These are the ones that will appear every year as they emerge, usually in the latter part of June, all the way through September. So these are the dog day or annual cicadas. Now, they contrast with our periodical cicadas, which we're only going to see every 13 or 17 years. That's how long they're developing underground. Our periodical cicadas will be up and out, maybe the first ones as early as the first part of May, but certainly the blizzard of cicadas is going to appear the last 2 weeks of May and last into June. Annual cicadas rely on basically stealth and speed for their primary defense. If you've ever tried to locate a dog day cicada in a treetop, it's very difficult to find them. They have banding patterns, they're green in color, they blend in very well. And if you could get close to them, they'll fly like an F-14. They really fly fast. Whereas our periodical cicadas are going to appear in massive numbers, as many as 1.5 million per acre. Their strategy is a little bit different. They are aposematically colored. They've got red eyes against a black body with orange wing pads. And their survival strategy is one of the most bizarre of any creature on planet Earth. It is what we call predator satiation. In other words, they're going to appear synchronously in such massive numbers, they're simply going to fill all the bellies of every animal on the planet that wants to eat one, and there'll still be enough left over to perpetuate their species. Predator satiation. Very, very strange. Now, there are actually 3 species of 17-year cicadas that will emerge this spring. It's not just one. The most common and the largest is the one we call septemdecim. One of the smaller ones, and my favorite, is called cassini, and then a more rare species is called septendecula. We can tell them apart by their size and color, particularly the bending patterns on their abdomen, on the ventral surface. We can also tell them apart by their song. So let me see if I can get the songs to play. Okay, that was septemdecim. Let me see if I can bring cassini up. Whoops. I seem to have lost my sound bar here. I apologize for that. Let me see if I can find this one. There we go. And septemdecula. Oh my goodness. Well, sorry about that. For some reason, my sound bars are hiding, but this one has a much more subdued kind of call, quite different than cassini or septemdecim. There are also 4 species of 13-year cicadas. Magicicada neotradecim, Magicicada tradecim, Magicicada tradecassini, and Magicicada tradecula. In other words, 13. Now, in terms of body color, in terms of size, in terms of song, except for neotradecim, which has a unique song, these other 3 are essentially undistinguishable from their 17-year congeners. So again, they're going to look pretty much exactly the same as the 17-year cicada. We'll talk about why this happens in just a moment or two. They're also going to differ as the 17-year cicadas do in their habitat preferences and, of course, their genetics. Now,
Mike?
Yeah.
Aaron wanted to know why cassini was your favorite before we move on.
You know, it's just a very cute little cicada. I really love this song. To me, it kind of sounds like castanets. Cassini actually was named after Cassini, who was a famous cicada biologist. They're very noisy. They, when you grab the males, they have an enormous call, an enormous squawking call that is kind of rather cute when you grab these things. So other than that, I can't tell you why. It's just a very cute, fast flying little cicada. Other than that, I really can't tell you. Okay, let's dig into the biology a little bit more now. So basically in several locations, ranging from the deep south, Florida, all the way up to New England, just past the Mississippi River in the west, we have various what we call broods of cicadas. Now, a brood of cicadas is a geographically distinct group of cicadas that will emerge synchronously either every 13 or 17 years. We have 12 broods of 17-year cicadas and 3 broods of 13-year cicadas for a total of 15 broods. The way we keep track of these is with Roman numerals, but brood 10 or brood X makes it even more dramatic. And this is what we call the big brood because it's found in 12 states ranging from northern Georgia to New York, and also, of course, in the District of Columbia. So this is the big brood coming up this spring. Here in Maryland, or in the mid-Atlantic region, we have several different broods. We're frankly quite blessed to have so many. This will be the distribution of brood 10. And people have asked, well, how, if I don't want to see cicadas, where should I go? Hey, just go over to Ocean City for a couple weeks. You're going to be okay over here. We're not going to have them on the Eastern Shore. You can also go into extreme southern Maryland, and there will be no cicadas down there in St. Mary's County this time. That's brood 2. We'll see there, and part of brood 19 is also down there. But this is the big brood coming up. There are 3 major patches in North America. One right here in the mid-Atlantic, that'll be ours, that'll be the epicenter. Another big cluster down in Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee, a little bit of Kentucky maybe. And also a very large brood centered here in Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. Okay.
And Mike,
So,
is that because of the sandy soil, somebody asked?
You know, I think it's related to periods of glaciation. Rising sea levels again, and where the glaciers basically spilled down. We'll talk a little bit more about what happened in the last 500,000 years or so, but it was during the time of glaciation, we believe fairly recently, here in North America, that all the different broods evolved. And we'll talk about the evolution of broods in just a few minutes. But yeah, probably sandy soil, and the fact that part of this may have been underwater at a critical period of time. Okay, so 2018 was in upstate New York. 19 was over here in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. Brood 9 just happened earlier this year down in Ohio, North Carolina, Kentucky parts. And here we are with brood 10, the 3 major clusters again. So let's talk a little bit about how we wound up with the extant broods. And I should say that during modern times, during recorded history, we've lost 2 broods. We lost brood 11 from Connecticut. We also lost brood 21 from Florida. And we have had local extirpations of cicadas in various parts of the Northeast. So in very recent time, as you might guess, several populations or parts of broods have disappeared. So on the evolutionary timescale, this basically got spinning from the ancestors of our periodic cicadas sometime back between 4 and 5 million years ago. The big major split between our friends, the decimals and the Cassini-decula branch of the family happened about 3.9 million years ago. Decula and Cassini split again about 2.5. But again, all the major broods, the evolution of these 15 distinct broods happened in, frankly, fairly recent times. Only about the past 500,000 years during periods of glaciation did we have the formation of the current 15 broods. So why did we see, I'm going to take you back now to 2017. 2017 in some areas, particularly here in my neighborhood in Columbia, Maryland, we had a very impressive emergence of cicadas. And it was not one of the other broods. These are what we call stragglers. These are basically brood 10 cicadas that emerged 4 years early, which would have put them towards a brood 6. Now, stragglers, I always thought the term straggler referred to somebody behind you, but no, when we talk cicada, a straggler is simply a group of cicadas that are emerging not within the massive synchronous emergence of their brood, but a little bit off schedule, usually at intervals of either 4 years early, sometimes 4 years late, or 1 year early or 1 year late. So these ones that emerge off cycle are what we call stragglers. The ones that happen early have been also called accelerations. These guys are time travelers. There's something in their genetic makeup that makes a portion of this brood simply emerge off schedule early. And we believe, the scientists believe, that it is this time traveling phenomenon that basically gave rise to those 15 different broods we have now. So for example, if we had a brood 14, get my cursor over here, brood 14, and part of brood 14 emerged 4 years early, it would become brood 10. If part of that brood emerged 4 years early, it would become brood 6. If those emerged 4 years early, it would become brood 2. And it's this phenomenon of early 4-year time jumps and then 1-year time jumps, we believe gave us the evolution of the 15 extant broods we have right now. It's very remarkable. The mechanism is still unknown for this or unresolved. Now, why?
My question, before you go on, when you had the geologic time scale up, are there fossilized cicadas that have been found?
No, this was all done on molecular. These were done with molecular markers, mitochondrial markers, and nuclear markers to make the timeline here. I'm not aware. I believe there are, dating back, there are other species of cicada that have been found in fossil remains, I believe. But periodical cicadas, this is very, very recent, right? 500,000 years. So no, this particular construct, this evolutionary model, was done with molecular markers. Good question. Okay, whoops. All right, synchrony. Why? Well, if your strategy is to fill all the bellies of the predators that want to eat you, then you better emerge synchronously. So there's very strong stabilizing selection, winnowing selection, because if you emerge too early, you're simply eaten into oblivion by all the predators. So strong selection to trim off either ends of this bell-shaped curve and synchronize those emergences. The safety in number strategy. Well, people will say, well, why so long? Why 13 and 17 years? I'll get into models about this in just a moment. But understand that cicadas spend most of their time in a habitat that's cool, right? They're underground. As you know, if you dig down 24 inches into the soil, it's going to be 55 degrees. So for insects, development is related to temperature. They're in a cold habitat, number one. They feed on a nutrient-poor tissue. They feed on what we call xylem sap. Xylem is constituted by minerals and water that are taken into the roots of plants and then transported up to the canopy for the magic of photosynthesis to happen. The adults also feed on xylem tissue up in the tree branches. So a poor quality tissue may slow down your development, right? The other factor is if you're going to try to win at this game of overwhelming a predator, you better be able to lay a lot of eggs. And for bugs, one way to lay a lot of eggs is to get big. And remember, cicadas are big insects. I mean, their aphid relatives are this big. Cicadas are several thousand times more massive than an aphid. So these are large insects that lay a lot of eggs up in the treetops. We also believe, or there's a theory, that the cold summers associated with the ice age and unpredictable weather favor spreading out your risk in time, steering you towards a longer generation rather than emerging every year when you might get clobbered by some random, very late snowfall or unpredictable weather event. Okay. The prime numbers keeps everybody basically locked in because prime numbers are only divisible, as you know, by themselves and 1. So this basically prevents, if they were to emerge every 2 years, part of a brood 2 years and part of a brood 4 years, every 2 by 4, 8 years, they'd been interbreeding, and this could simply dilute the synchronous emergence. Hence, there's been selection for prime number synchronized massive emergences of cicadas. Now, the cicada life cycle, let's talk about that for a little bit. What am I going to see? Well, pretty soon, usually by the end of March and certainly by April, you will begin to see what we call mud turrets. These are going to be the escape galleries for the cicadas that are presently underground. I've been working in my flower beds and my gardens last fall and this spring, and hey, guess what? Those cicadas are already there. They're just about ready to go. So a little bit later this year, when we go out in April, we'll pull the leaves away from the base of a tree, and by golly, there are going to be the escape hatches, the mud turrets, and the holes from which the cicadas will begin to emerge. Okay, so right now they're ready to go. They're just waiting. And what they're waiting for is soil temperatures to approach about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Because at 64 degrees Fahrenheit, that's the signal that the earth is now warm enough that they can get up and out of the ground. There will be leaves on the trees. They will be able to become active, fly, find their mates. Big boy band up in the treetops, singing their hearts out, mating, females laying eggs. So this is the signal that summer or spring is really here. It's warm enough to get up and out and fulfill their biological imperative. So we also think that photo period is very important, perhaps in signaling day length, when it's the right time to emerge up and out of the soil. Okay, so it's going to be, again, soil temperature, day length, and basically light intensity. Those of you who have witnessed an emergence of periodical cicadas know that most of the emergence is going to take place as daylight is waning. As it begins to get dark at dusk, that's when they're going to be up and out of the ground. Why? Because many of the visually hunting predators it'll be just a little bit harder for birds and some mammals and some other reptiles to probably see and find cicadas. So as dusk falls, the cicadas will begin to emerge from the ground and make that mad dash to a vertical structure. I'll run a little video for you here, I hope, and we'll see how that goes. Before we run the video, I want to show you this. Again, this is 1 square foot. There are 20 some holes in this square foot. That's going to translate into something like 1.3 million cicadas per acre. And they do like classical music. Okay, so up and out of the ground, a perilous journey over sidewalks and roadways. Mortality is enormously high during that dusk period when they're up and out. Over to the tree, find a vertical structure, latch on, and then they will begin to ecdyse. They're going to shed their exoskeleton, molt. So the next step again, the exoskeleton will split along the midline. The cicada will begin to pump itself up, working out of the old exoskeleton. Eventually, they'll be suspended in midair in a position like this. The cicada will extricate itself, hang from the old pupal case or the skin, the shed skin on the tree, or the shell, some people call it. And finally, the wings will begin to expand as the cicada pumps hemolymph and blows those wings up. This will take place in the span of maybe an hour or so. But again, the cicada is extremely vulnerable at this point in time on the tree. It simply can't fly. It really can't move very well because it has to wait for that exoskeleton to harden before it will be flight capable and able to move effectively. Okay, the period of about 4 to 6 days, we call it the teneral period, while the exoskeleton is hardening and becoming fully formed, so muscles attached, so flight can take place, so they can get up into the treetops. Then it's up into the treetops they go. The adults are going to live, again, mortality is very high, so many of them simply don't make it from day one, but they can live usually from 2 to 4 weeks. So we'll see cicadas starting sometime in May, and they'll be with us until probably the first and second week of June. Okay, so for about a month or 5 weeks, they'll be very common. They're also going to feed on xylem tissue while they're up in the treetops. Now, let's get to this business of romance. As Bronwyn said, it's almost Valentine's Day, so we have to talk a little bit about courtship and mating. It is only the boys that sing. The males have a structure. It's called the timbal organ. It's on the side of their abdomen, just beneath the wings. And I'll play you the timbal sound so you can see what the alarm call sounds like. This is the alarm call, sometimes called the squawk call. No cicadas were harmed in the making of this production, so don't worry. That little cicada was just fine. Now, in addition to the squawk call, in other words, if it's being attacked by a bird or a human with big fingers, that's the call it's going to make. But when it's up in the treetop, it's all about romance. One of the calls they'll use basically is an assembly call. Remember, there are going to be 3 species emerging simultaneously. So one of the calls simply brings all the members of the same species together in the same place. Once they get eyeball to eyeball, the male cicada will use a variety of songs, a performance, to try to woo his mate, to win the affections of the mother of his nymphs. So, if indeed he's successful, the female will signal her receptivity with a little flick of her wings, a little clicking sound that basically says, hey, you're the guy I've been waiting for. They're going to hook up, they're going to mate. And this is kind of the unfortunate part of the story in some regards. He uses what we call a copulatory plug. It's basically the equivalent of a chastity belt to make sure that his sperm are the only sperm that will fertilize those eggs. After he's done mating, he's just going to find another female cicada It just doesn't seem fair. But hey, that's the life of the cicada. Okay, I often get a question. I answered this question before. We'll swing back to the biology in just a minute. Are there blue-eyed cicadas? Yeah, there are blue-eyed cicadas. It's purported to be a genetic mutation, 1 in a million, but I see them all the time. So there's a variety of eye colors, as you can see in these three: red-eyed cicadas, orange-eyed cicadas, and white-eyed or blue-eyed cicadas. So there is variation, and you'll see these if you look at enough cicadas, I guarantee you. Okay. As I said, they have the alarm call, the calling song. Let me see if I can get these to play. Here's a typical calling song. And here's the courtship song. When we listen to this, what I want you to do, you can actually hear the female flick her wing when I play this one. So listen carefully. You'll hear the male call, and then you'll hear the click. Okay. Our dog day cicadas, I don't have a I don't have a video of the periodical cicadas calling, but watch how the dog day cicada, I was able to sneak up on one of these rascals and get a recording and a video. So watch how they make their sounds. You'll actually see their abdomen vibrate. The male's abdomen is hollow to act as a reverberation chamber, amplifying the sound. And the sound of the cicada call can be quite deafening. It can actually approach something to 80 to 100 decibels, which is the sound of a jet aircraft going overhead or a lawnmower nearby. So let's have a listen to this. Okay. Now, once he's won the attention of his potential mate, they're going to mate. And you'll often see female and male cicadas. If you go to my Bug of the Week episode this week, you'll see lots of insects engaged in this intimate behavior. I think they were trying to avoid the escape the paparazzi here. Who can blame them? It's pretty easy to tell the males from the females. The males will have a rounded abdomen. The females will have a pointy abdomen. And this appendage right here is called the ovipositor. That's what she's going to use to insert the eggs into the tree. Okay? So easy to tell the guys from the gals. Okay. Now, oviposition. The female cicadas are going to move into the treetops, and they're going to find small branches, small twigs. And here's kind of the bad part about cicadas, if there is indeed a bad part. They're going to deposit eggs in small branches about the size between about 3 to 11 millimeters in diameter. They're going to test branches to see if they're the right texture and thickness. And then she's going to use her ovipositor to cut what we call egg nests or slits in the branches and deposit the eggs. Watch as she deposits eggs into the branch. You can see her abdomen pumping. What she's doing is pumping eggs from her ovaries down through the ovipositor into the egg nest. She'll lay several of these egg nests in the terminal of branches. Each egg nest could have anywhere from 20 to 30 eggs per nest. And those eggs are going to take, 6 weeks to maybe a couple months to mature. Once the eggs mature, remember, they're going to be 80 feet up in the air. The little tiny nymphs then are going to hatch from these eggs. They're going to tumble down to the ground 80 feet below. They're going to bounce twice, and then they're going to burrow into the soil anywhere from maybe 18 inches to a couple feet underground. They're going to find the roots of trees. They're going to create a little cell, a little habitat, plug in, and begin to suck on the xylem sap on the roots of the trees. It's not at all unusual. I'm sure when you've gardened or put in flower beds beneath trees, you'll see the little nymphs. This is what the cicada nymph looks like when you dig it up from the soil, okay? So the nymphs are there right now. They are ready to go. They're just marking time until their brood mates complete their development and are ready to emerge simultaneously here in just a few weeks.
Hey, Mike.
Yo.
So when you said that the males put a little plug in to make sure that they're the only sperm, but they can go to multiple females, so they have multiple plugs, or they go to only one female?
Yeah, life's not fair. What can I tell you? Yeah, they apparently have a battery of plugs they can use.
Okay.
They're guys. I don't know. I don't know. But yes, it's called the copulatory plug, and this is not at all unusual in the insect world for males to have a copulatory plug to ensure that his sperm are the ones that will fertilize those eggs. So this is not unique to cicadas. Okay, one of the questions I've been asked a lot, I've already talked to several mothers of the bride wondering when they should plan the May wedding this year. And I've said, you better get it in very early in May, or you want to put it off to maybe the third week in June if you don't want cicadas at that outdoor wedding. But I say, hey, if you do it right around Memorial Day, it's going to make that wedding even more memorable because you'll have a couple 100,000 guests at that wedding. Here in Maryland, I just completed a study, a citizen science project, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. But basically, what these graphs are showing us is the day of the year when cicadas emerged last year. Last year, we had some stragglers emerge back in 2020. Some brood 10 stragglers emerged here in the district in Maryland, in Northern Virginia, and in Ohio and Kentucky. I used this data to create little graphs as when we saw the emergence. Now, the very first cicada we saw last year, we saw on April 19th at day 110, and it was near Towson, Maryland. The last one we saw was on the 14th of June. But again, the bulk of cicadas emerged right around day 148 or 150. Which puts it, I think, right around May 28th. So certainly those last 2 weeks in May, we're guaranteed to have a lot of cicadas coming up here in the DMV. All right, let's talk a little bit more about their basic biologies. Again, we've talked a little bit about the non-periodical or dog day cicadas, rapid invasive flight. For periodical cicadas, the massive synchronous emergent, predator satiation. But unfortunately, there's a lot of things that are going to eat them. It's a hard knock life for cicadas out there. They've been described as poor defensive species, never seen animals more entirely stupid than the 17-year locust. Again, this is by Cassini, and they are been called predator foolhardy. Here you see a periodical cicada being eaten by a much tinier predatory stink bug. It's got its beak in the abdomen between the sclerites, the plates, basically just sucking the life out of a cicada. How that happens, I'm not really sure. Okay. One of the studies I've been involved with, I was telling Jean about this study a little bit earlier. I've been trying to explore a little bit more about the defensive behaviors of cicadas. And I've done this over a number of years with brood 10 back in 2004 and a brood 2 in 2013. And then the acceleration we had back in 2017. I used two methods to see how cicadas would respond to an attack. I had a bird, a stuffed bird on a stick, which I would approach the cicada with. That's called the bird on stick method. And then I simply said the hand on arm method. And it turns out, this was just proof of concept here, that there was no difference in either using a bird on a stick or a hand on an arm to elicit the response. Now, they either had no response, or they would drop from the plant, which is pretty typical of insect behavior, to simply drop from a plant, or they would fly. Now, so if you look at the data across all other parameters that I measured, they are largely foolhardy. About 60% of cicadas can simply be grabbed. Okay, so predators, they're not so good at getting away. 15% drop, 26% fly. But the interesting part of the story here, it was temperature dependent. So at colder temperatures, you have many more cicadas that are dropping from the plant, but at warmer temperatures, they become flight capable, and now they escape by flight. And there's a direct relationship between the ambient temperature and the proportion of cicadas that can fly. Okay, so this was a little laboratory study I did to demonstrate that, you know, at cold temperatures, they don't fly. But once we begin to best the upper teens on a centigrade scale, then we get increasingly more cicadas able to fly until finally everybody can fly once we're in the, you know, up in the 30 plus centigrade range. Okay, so they do have defenses, and it's temperature dependent. Now, some of the other, as I was doing this study in the mall, one of the big plazas at University of Maryland, I would take the cicadas and throw them up in the air to see if they could fly, the ones as they came out of the different temperature regimes. There were no birds present that I could see, but as I threw these things up in the air, I realized that birds really like to eat these things. Watch what happened to some of the cicadas that fell to the ground. So I don't know where those birds came from. They were just, but they knew what to do with cicadas. There was no question about it. There'll also be many invertebrates that eat cicadas. Remember I said that the most vulnerable time was that night when they were emerging and molting from their pupal case, from the last nymphal case into the adult. They're going to be preyed on by a whole variety of vertebrates and invertebrates. These are carpenter ants harvesting cicadas on the bark of a tree. And perhaps one of the most bizarre of all enemies of cicadas is a specialized fungus called Massospora, What Massospora does is it lays dormant in the ground as a spore for 17 years. And when the cicada nymph comes up from the soil, the spores attach to the skin of the cicada. They recognize that it is a cicada. Then they germinate. They send hyphae down inside the body of the cicada where they multiply. They go through a generation. They produce a large number of spores that are distributed from the fruiting body on the abdomen of the cicada. They do not kill the cicada. The cicada is still fully mobile. The cicada can fly. Here you see a cicada walking up a branch. It's got no abdomen. They can also fly, so they're dispersing the spores all around the environment. In addition to this, the cicadas will mate or attempt to mate with female cicadas, thereby infecting those females. So at that point in time, Massospora becomes an STD in the cicada population. Now, here's the most bizarre part of the story, as far as I'm concerned. Remember I said that the male cicada sings, the female cicada flicks her wings, right, to signal that she's willing to mate. The Massospora makes the male cicada mimic the clicking sound of the female. So now other male cicadas that are uninfected will attempt to mate with the cicada that is infected, and this increases the distribution of Massospora through the population of cicadas. Now that to me is pretty crazy. It basically zombieizes the cicada. Fascinating. Okay, now in their final act, people will ask, well, what good are cicadas? Well, what good are cicadas? In their final act of nutrition here, what they're going to do is they're going to rain down underneath the very plants from which they were spawned. They're going to fertilize those plants. The nutrients that were in their bodies, in addition to feeding birds and every other creature, the remaining nutrients are then going to recycle into the environment and add to the nutrient load in that soil. The other piece of the puzzle here is underneath these trees, you're going to have myriad exit holes. Now, these exit holes will basically go down in the soil a foot or more. This is going to allow for water infiltration. So they basically are aerating the soil underneath the trees from which they were spawned. And as I said before, there'll be many, many kinds of insects. This is another kind. This is a pavement ant basically taking apart cicadas. So they are simply going to connect the food web, contribute both up and down, both to predators, to parasites, but also to decomposers. It's the circle of life. So they provide an enormous benefit in terms of recycling nutrients through our ecosystems.
Mike, Michael wanted to know, along with that, if will we see a spike in population boom of any animal coming up?
Yeah, sure. The birds, some of the birds will, they will clutch more successfully. Some will double clutch. So they've recorded several species of birds that are going to respond positively to this. I'm not sure I've seen mammalian studies, but certainly all these inverts that feed on them, the best documented cases are with birds. We know that birds are going to really enjoy what happens this spring. So yes, there will be several benefits to other creatures. More charismatic, although it's hard to believe that anything can be more charismatic than a cicada, but a lot of animals will do better. All right, let's get back to the nitty gritty here. What about cicada damage? Well, they are going to lay eggs in mature trees. People will say, and I had to talk to a reporter about this, they said, well, oh, it's natural pruning and it's good for the tree. No, I don't think trees like to be naturally pruned. I mean, I don't think a tree really likes to have this happen to it. So the notion that this, in some way, this damage is the tree likes this or it's good for the tree, I don't really think so. The scientific studies will tell us that this damage in the long term probably has no severe consequences for the tree. I found 2 articles at least that said trees that sustain cicada damage show no reduction in girth, basically DBH, no long-term changes in growth patterns. So big trees, I think, will be able to tolerate this and they'll be okay. We're not worried about our well-established big trees, even though they're going to look like they have received some injury, they're going to come through okay. The ones we have to worry about are recently transplanted trees. Remember what I said about little branches this big? Well, guess what? Every branch on a sapling is this big. Cicadas are going to love these trees. Cicadas also like to hit edge species. In other words, trees, specimens that are growing on an ecotone are going to be heavily damaged, and particularly trees with very extensive elongated branches. So young saplings that are pushing out a lot of branch are going to be favored by cicadas. I talked to one nursery grower who had recently transplanted a whole field of trees in 2004. He said those trees were wiped out and killed by cicadas. So it's really the recently transplanted trees are the ones I want people to focus on. Okay, let's talk now about what we're going to do. I heard I could wrap it in cheesecloth or netting. We'll talk about that. I heard I could put bands of sticky stuff around it. Remember the cicada nymphs have to crawl up? Well, also remember that the females are going to fly from tree to tree. The tree they come up on isn't necessarily the tree where they're going to fly to chorus and mate and lay their eggs. In fact, they're going to move around between trees. So even if you could keep some from getting to the treetop, it's not going to prevent others from flying in and laying eggs on that tree. Others will say, hey, I can spray them with pesticides. Look, I can go to the big box store and look, it says on the label, cicadas. Why would you want to do that? Well, here's why you wouldn't want to do that. Because of all the different charismatic, beneficial organisms we have in environments, one of the most important things to do is try to conserve these animals and try to find ways to make these habitats more friendly. So the last thing I want to do is go out and start spraying trees with pesticides when I've got all these other beneficial insects, pollinators, predators that are in this landscape. So I'm not going to go there. Where I am going to go is here. An excellent study was done back in 1990 by an entomologist, a fruit specialist up in West Virginia. What Hogmeyer found is if he put young apple trees, young fruit trees in netting with a 1 centimeter square mesh size, he could almost totally eliminate any damage caused by those egg scars I talked about on those young fruit trees. He sprayed trees with synthetic pyrethroids and carbamates and organophosphates. He sprayed these trees multiple times and he still couldn't protect them because the cicadas will keep returning. So if you're trying to spray cicadas out, you might kill what's there for a day or two, but more are coming back. He did find that when mesh size increased to about 2.5 or 5 centimeters, the benefit was lost. We repeated this experiment using one of the neonicotinoid insecticides back in 2006 and found, by golly, if we net our small trees, we can totally eliminate the egg nests created by the cicadas. Even the systemic insecticide was not effective in completely reducing the damage. So I'm telling people now a couple things. So let's run through what the recommendations are. Spraying is not going to be as effective as netting. The cost is going to be highly comparable. We've done a cost breakdown on this. To treat a tree is going to come out to be about the same dollar-wise as to simply buy this netting and wrap it up. It costs us about $3 per tree, and we could do it in about 20 minutes, okay? As I said, the non-target organisms we have to be concerned with, and we certainly don't want to be treating trees and potentially killing our beneficial friends out there. I've also recommended to many communities, do not plant young trees this spring. I've talked to several urban planners that were planning to put trees in this spring. I'm saying if you can, delay till the fall planting season. The fall is an excellent time to plant trees, woody plants. So if you can put it off, put it off. If you have planted trees in the last couple years, or you're planning and must plant them this spring, then by all means, consider wrapping them in netting, okay? And once the damage happens, on your mature trees, the trees are going to heal much better if you simply prune out the damaged branches. The damaged branches are going to flag, some will break off. It simply will help the tree heal quicker if you simply prune off the damaged branches. So that's what I'm recommending. What are some of the other things you can do? Well, let's have some fun. I like to tell people that this is like having a National Geographic special right in your own backyard. This is something that kids can get into, kids of all ages. It's a wonderful opportunity to go out and learn all the different elements of biology and ecology. Pets are going to want to eat these things, but don't let them eat too many. I had reports of dogs that, big golden retrievers that ate buckets of them, and they got a little bit jammed up. So let them taste a few. You can skim them out of your swimming pools, cover ponds if you don't want them in your ponds, and eat some if you like. As I said, it's a fantastic show, so try to enjoy it. I thought this was pretty cool. Somebody actually had cicadas in their swimming pool on the bottom. That's cool. Now, everybody likes to watch a bug geek eat a bug, and I'm always happy to oblige. So I'll be eating a lot of cicadas this spring. There's no question about it. As I said, a wonderful opportunity to teach children all the wonders of life, all the wonders of the natural world. It can't get better than cicadas because it's happening right in your own backyard. Now, one of the fun things that happens, and when this happens, I get asked to talk to the media about this thing. I've filmed with some 37 different countries on cicadas and most of the major and minor television stations here in the US. Back in 2004, the last time I had organized a group of graduate students, and we worked with National Geographic to produce a cicada special. I'm also teaching a course with my colleague, Dr. Shrewsbury, this spring, and we're recreating what we call ourselves the Cicada Maniacs, and our mission is to go out and help educate people. But I'm just going to show you a little clip of one of the episodes we did with Nat Geo. One of the students created a cicada cookbook called Cicadalicious. Jenna, Cicadalicious is a bestseller.
I have some emergence cookies. So they're an experiment. I'll try them out on you guys before I put them in the cookbook. But basically, they're just a chocolate chip cookie with a cicada on top, so it kind of looks like it's coming out of a pile of mud. Oh, no. This cookbook stuff has been just amazing. I kind of did it just on a whim. I thought it was going to be sort of a novel, fun thing, and so people are really into this idea of maybe eating some cicadas for a meal or two.
Cool. I Googled this morning. I saw that Cicadalicious is now at the top of the Google list. So, rock on, you did it.
So is this like an Oreo where you save the middle for last, so you eat around the cicada?
So that was Cicadalicious. The other thing is I was goofing around with a Today Show crew in the laboratory, and I had some cicadas crawling around. And somehow or another, Jay Leno's producer saw some of the footage they didn't use on the Keurig thing. So I was invited to go out to California to see if I could get Jay Leno to eat cicadas. That was what the producer wanted to find out. So I smuggled cicadas out there in my carry-on, a couple hundred in a cooler. And we had fixed them nice. I did the part of the scientist, kind of like I'm doing tonight, and talked about the biology of cicadas. And Jay said, well, does anybody eat cicadas? And I said, of course. And I said, look at this. And we had these cicadas prepared as pot stickers. Not pot stickers, but kind of, they were on a skewer. So there were about 6 cicadas lined up here. They've been very nicely prepared. We brought the cicadas out. And the other guest that night was Russell Crowe. So I'll try to run this clip. We'll see if the audio works. I hope it does.
Thanks, mate.
Here's your skirt, Jay.
What are you supposed to
Jay,
do?
I tell you what, I'll give you $1 if you eat one. Delicious. They're wonderful.
Hey, Superman's father.
That's right. And we don't have cicadas on Krypton.
They've got
Delicious.
They've got a delicate nutty flavor.
Oh, nutty flavor. Fantastic.
A buttery texture.
Hey, it's better for you than a Cheeto, all right?
Better for you than a Cheeto, gang. So how can you go wrong with that? The other thing I want to point out is there's a wonderful citizen science project. It's called Cicada Safari. It's a free download. Basically, what you'll do is get the app, put it on your iPhone or your Android system. You go out, if you see cicadas, you simply snap a picture, load them up, and then it comes to me or some of the other cicada researchers. We vet the picture, make sure it's a cicada, and then we enter it into our database. What we're trying to do is actually track the occurrence of cicadas, because believe it or not, we still don't know exactly where they're going to be. They're very patchy in distribution. So some areas will have a lot of cicadas, and if you go 5 miles away, there'll be very few. So we're still trying to map where they are and also when they emerge. That data I showed you, that where they emerged around the end of May, that graph, that's data that we collected from Cicada Safari. So this would be a great thing for kids to do, for naturalists to do. So if you want to get involved in a citizen science project that really is important, hey, Cicada Safari might be for you. As I said, I'll be posting lots of stories at my Bug of the Week blog. If you go to Bug of the Week and click on the archive, a search box will pop up. And I probably have 15 different stories already loaded in there on cicadas. And in March and April, I'll be running a lot of cicada stories. There's also a wonderful cicada website called Cicada Mania. And also the University of Michigan has a great cicada website as well. Okay, so with that, I want to thank you for inviting me into your homes this evening. I hope you've learned something about cicadas. It's going to be pretty spectacular, so get ready. And we're in for some real fun, I think. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop the screen share and hopefully get you guys back. Are you still with me?
We're all here, Mike, but we're not back. We're still sharing your screen.
Okay, let me see if I can wipe that out. Let's see, stop share.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
That was phenomenal. We do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Lingering on.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Couple of things about the saplings. There's 2 questions and they kind of go together. One is, are native saplings more resistant than like a nursery sapling? And then are evergreens more safe?
Yeah, they like, as I said, number one, they're going to like young, rapidly growing trees, ones on the forest edge, right? Recently transplanted because they have long branches that aren't very dense. Dense trees, including gymnosperms, your fir trees, your pine trees, they tend to be denser, not so much. Okay, so that's number one. There was one study of native and non-native, and I'm trying to recall what it was. I want to say there was a trend towards favoring native trees over non-natives, but I would actually have to go back and research that. I think I commented on this in a recent publication in Bronwyn. What I will do is I will send you a copy of that reprint. It just came out, and I think that question may be answered. Perhaps you can share that with your naturalists and the guests tonight. And yeah, so there's at least one paper that looked at natives and non-natives, but hey, don't, if you've got young trees, the most important thing is to protect those young trees. Don't worry too much about the native, non-native thing on this, I think, because they're going to go for a wide variety of all kinds of trees.
And a couple of things on just the natural history.
Sure.
When they emerge, is there a ratio of male to female?
Boy, that's a great question. Well, they do protandry, right? This is pretty much commonplace in the insect world. Protandry means males first, right? So the males will emerge before the females. The strategy here is like, you know, in the dating game, if you're gonna go to the tavern or somewhere like that, you don't want to be the last guy there, because basically, you know, all the selection takes place very early in the evening, right? So many insects, the males will emerge first, so they basically have the pick of the females. So this is pretty common in the plant world. It's also pretty common in the insect world. So males will be out first, but to my knowledge, I don't know that it's not a 50-50. I can't tell you for a fact that it is a 50-50, but I haven't heard anything about a skew. You know, a lot of insects have skew in their population dynamics. I mean, some are parthenogenetic, like aphids. Some have lost the males. In other species, usually when resources tend to be scarce, you'll see a shift towards males because they're getting out of town. If resources, food sources are very abundant, they will often shift the sex ratio to females so they can take advantage of the very plentiful resources. But I haven't heard this in cicadas.
All right. And are they blind? Somebody heard if they were blind.
Are they blind? No, they got pretty cool eyes. And yeah, they get eyeball to eyeball. That male and the female, man, they're just looking at each other, man. He's singing his heart out. It's so romantic. He's hopeful, you know, and if he hears, boom, he's there. So yeah, they're eyeball to eyeball up there.
And Dave was interested, I don't know if it has to do with the drop or fly, but he says that he gets dive bombed by them. And why do they dive bomb people?
I don't know, Dave, are you making any clicking noises or anything like that when are your shoes clicking when you're walking around? Because I heard you can attract the males if you make little clicking sounds, Dave.
I'm asking on behalf of my children.
Oh gosh. Well, you know what it is, Dave. Of course I'm kidding you here, but these things, there's so many of them flying around. I think it's just random collisions. It just seems like they're dive bombing you. They are kind of foolish and dopey when they fly, though. The one thing that I didn't talk about, and this will come up, you know, people will ask, are they going to be harmful to humans? And my pat line is, you know, no, they're not going to. You know, they're not going to carry away dogs, cats, or small children. They're not going to bite or sting. Now, technically, that is correct. They do have piercing, sucking mouth parts because they are hemiptera, right? And I will be honest with you, if a cicada is very thirsty, and I've been holding it for an hour, as I often do in a show and tell, it'll try to get that beak in me and get a little drink. So biting, no, but a little probing, yeah, if you hold on to those things and they're really thirsty, they'll give you a little probe. Okay, so I have to be frank about that. So if you're going to pick them up and admire them, I will tell you, Jay Leno did not get probed or stung. We actually had live cicadas there as well in that interview. The funny thing is after we ate cicadas, after Russell Crowe said, you know, he wasn't going to have one. We were on commercial break and everybody in the audience wanted to eat cicadas, and we served the whole platter full of cicadas to the audience. So people will be into eating cicadas, no question.
And I'm sure that we had a couple of questions about recipes. I'm sure you can Google them and get some
Oh.
online. Or do you have a favorite recipe, Mike?
Oh gosh, you know, I've had them boiled, stirred, fried with a little garlic and olive oil. They're great in an omelet. Now, the ones we had for Jay were adults, and they're not my favorite because you have to, of course, take off legs and wings. You don't want to be having, you know, legs sticking out of your teeth. That's not attractive. So take off the legs and the wings if you're going to eat the adults. But my favorites are to collect the nymphs, wash the nymphs, make sure they're nice and clean, and then you can do things. But the easiest ones to work with, of course, are the ones that are molting. So the soft-shelled cicadas, it's just like a soft-shelled crab. If you go out early in the morning, you can find the ones before they've hardened. You can simply harvest them, freeze them, add them to an omelet. You know, they're great with peppers and onions in an omelet. You know, it's like eating anything. If you put enough sauces on them and things like that, they're going to be delicious. But I have eaten them right off the tree. I was doing this with a CBS crew. It went down that rabbit hole. They said, well, I was standing there talking about cicadas, and I think it was not Kate Snow, Hannah Storm. If anybody remembers Hannah Storm, she was doing the interview. I was in Chicago. She said, well, does anybody eat a cicada? I said, yeah, I've had a couple dozen already today. And this was like 7 o'clock in the morning. And she said, well, would you eat one? I said, sure. So I grabbed one and I popped out my mouth. Oh, it's got a delicious nutty flavor, you know, buttery texture. She said, boy, that's more than we wanted to know. And I said, well, you asked me, you know, I mean, if you don't want to see me eat a cicada, then don't give me the dare, you know? So anyway, I try them. I mean, you know, they're like land shrimp. Cicadalicious, you can find Cicadalicious on the internet. Simply Google Cicadalicious. One of the websites has it posted. You can read all the recipes. We did put a disclaimer in there. Anybody that has a shrimp allergy or shellfish allergy should not eat it because the protein, the chitinous protein, is going to be the same, right? So we actually did have somebody from Illinois try to sue us because he had eaten cicadas and had a reaction. And we said, hey, buddy, look at page 1. There's the disclaimer. So if you're going to eat them, but you're allergic to shellfish, be careful or don't do that, okay?
Mike, do you know of any children's books that kind of cover the periodic cicada life cycle?
There is one. Nat Geo did one back in '04. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of children's books on the market. I do have an ABC book. It's called 26 Things That Bug Me. It's an alphabet book for young readers. You know, it's a really good gift. You know, I always read to my kids and was read to as a child. So I created a ABC book, and C is for cicada in my book. All my granddaughters think A is for antlion, B is for bumblebee, C is for cicada. You know, A is not for apple in my household. So you can find that online, 26 Things That Bug Me.
Okay.
But there are lots of cicada books, yeah.
A couple of things about timing. So when do they call? Because somebody's into frog watch and didn't know if it's going to be too loud for the frog calling.
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but there is one species of frog, and I'm sure somebody in this group, you know, knows the answer to this. And long about mid-April, you know, we'll hear the spring peepers for sure, but there's another species of frog that's coming in early April, mid-April, and it's almost fooled me. I'm saying, oh my God, they're out singing already. No. So I don't know this. It is very loud. It's overwhelming. I wouldn't be surprised if it interferes with not only, you know, amphib calls, but probably feathered reptiles are going to struggle with this as well. I think birds in particular, because this is going to be highly disruptive sound-wise. In the tropics, these things are deafening. I was in Costa Rica last year, and it actually was painful. The noise was so loud, it was painful. People hiking on the mountain were going like this and having headaches. So at 80 to 100 decibels, it's going to be rocking.
And you said that the emergence occurs in different places, but someone was interested. Well, don't they emerge where they were last time?
They move around quite a bit. So they're going to, remember, your forest edge, if you think about succession, right? Basically, if you have open space, old field succession, you're going to have lots of mature trees in your center, but you're going to have these nice young trees with elongated branches. Think about the branch habit of your trees in the middle of a forest versus an edge. You're going to have a lot of long, skinny branches. That's where they're going to aggregate. That's where those eggs are going to then fall down. So as that wood basically walks, as the forest moves, the cicadas are going to move with it as well. A lot of people don't realize there's actually now more forested area in Eastern North America now than there was 2 centuries ago, right? So a lot of people will say, and we know in some places cicadas have been extirpated. There's no question, places in Connecticut and Long Island, due to habitat destruction, we've lost cicadas. But I believe that here in the DMV, where we've had a turnover of vast farms that were once soybeans and hay and corn into residential properties where people are planting trees, and with forest preservation and conservation, I think our cicadas may actually be doing better now than they were 200 years ago in many areas in the DMV. So it isn't all bad, I think. I think cicadas, I thought cicadas were spectacular in 2004. I thought they were better in 2004 than they were in 87. So maybe it's just me getting excited about my spirit animal, but I'm really rooting for cicadas this year.
Is there going to be an increase in cicada killer wasps?
That's worked its way into the press. I've seen 2 articles, one in USA Today, where I did a piece, and another one in some other thing, and they were doing a story on periodical cicadas, and they were showing a video of cicada killers killing a dog day cicada. And I wrote the writer, I said, look, dog day cicadas usually are coming out in the end of June, July, August, and September. And I said, our periodical cicadas are really done. Will the cicada killers take a periodical cicada? The answer is yes, they will. But they do not specialize on periodical cicadas. They specialize on dog day cicadas. So they will take them, but it's not going to be a dent. The real dent is going to be all the other predators, birds in particular. Some of our small mammals are going to go nuts. The raccoons and the skunks are already excavating cicadas from the soil. So we're going to have lots of reports soon of small mammals digging up the dirt as they're eating the nymphs. And, the birds are just going to have a heyday with this. So and then the Massospora is really going to take a toll too. So they will take them, but nah, they're not driving the system.
Right. Is there a couple of landscaping ones? Karen says she couldn't find it really inexpensive netting that you were mentioning. Where do you look for the netting?
Yeah, I just Googled it up not long ago. I can't give you an exact one, but just keep fishing around in cicada netting. Some of the netting that's being recommended for deer, I think, has a mesh size that would be appropriate. Remember, you want to get about 3/8 or 1 centimeter, but there are already guys in cities that have found this. You can buy these giant rolls. I know I talked to one nursery guy. He's already got this giant roll. So I can't tell you exactly, but go onto the internet and just start Googling up netting, cicada netting or something like that, and keep working your way through. You'll find netting that's inexpensive.
Yeah, and and are bushes just as vulnerable as saplings?
They will get on shrubs. There's no question about that. I had a picture of a Japanese threadleaf maple that was netted, so they will hit low hanging plants as well. But yeah, I think if you, the other piece of the puzzle, I should have mentioned this too, they're going to be very patchy. So even though there's a broad distribution, I remember in '04 in Adamstown, Maryland, there were cicadas all over the place, Laytonsville, but you went to Frederick, there were no cicadas. So the important piece of the puzzle now is if you had cicadas in '04, you're gonna have them in 2021. If you didn't have cicadas in '04, you're unlikely to have them in 2021. If you just moved in between '04 and 2021, ask your neighbors if they had cicadas. That's the first step, because as I said, they're very patchy. You're gonna have 1 million of them per acre here. You can go 5 miles away and there are none. So talk to your neighbors, find out if you've got a problem before you panic. But if you had them 17 years ago, odds are good that you're gonna have them again, and you should act accordingly, I think.
And Barbara has her hand up. Barbara?
Oh, but I'm going to get Barbara in a minute, but I see somebody put this in. Yeah. Look, check your tree before you put the netting on. Make sure you don't have any bird nests in the tree, number one. Number two, make sure there are no snakes in the tree trying to find birds, okay? Because snakes can get caught in netting. There's no question about that. I don't know how to get around that. I think probably if you had a baffle, if you're really worried about snakes climbing up into the tree and getting stuck on the netting, design some kind of baffle that can help keep the snake out or something like that. But I have had concern about snakes in particular getting caught. I got to tell you the truth though, with a mesh size of 1 centimeter, yeah, it'd be pushing it, I think. I've had snakes get caught in bigger mesh sizes, 5 centimeters, stuff like that, bigger mesh, but yeah, it's could be problematic. So take that into consideration before you put your nets up. Birds and snakes for sure.
And Sue wants to know, during very cold winters, do they go through diapause to survive? Or
Nah, they're just cranking away. Remember, you go down 2 feet, you're at 55. So they're just down there. Now, the fascinating part of this story is that they actually will slow down. So they don't, there are 5 instars, 5 nymphal instars, and they're not all going through at the same time. They're going through like this, and the guys that are here like 2 years ago, they're just sitting there waiting for the other guys to catch up. Now, how they're keeping track of time, nobody asked that question. That's a real good one. Because remember, you don't have photoperiodic cues. We use photoperiod, right? Synchronizes hormone levels and things like this, right? But think about your trees, right? Think about your plants. Your phytohormones, your plant hormones and cycles of nutrients and things like that do cycle on a season. And there's one theory that when they're plugged into the xylem, they're actually monitoring phytohormones. They're counting years by circulating phytochemicals in the plant, which makes a lot of sense to me, right?
That was one of the questions that but I'm glad that you.
Yeah, that's one theory. I don't think we really know, or I haven't seen a definitive answer. I know that in years where there are high nutrients, they've actually, I think, been able to force cicadas by fertilizing trees. So maybe nutrient quality is part of this too. So there are a lot of mysteries. There are a lot of mysteries about this particular animal that we don't fully understand.
And Cliff was interested in overlap between adjacent broods.
Yeah, that's how we think broods happen. So remember, I said they're time travelers. So if you can imagine, here's a brood, it emerges, let's say it was brood 10. and then part of them make a jailbreak, right? They emerge 4 years early. If they win, it's going to be maybe on the edge right next door. Now they're brood 6. In 2017 here in Columbia, Maryland, we had an acceleration. These were brood 10 cicadas that emerged 4 years early in 2017. They were in massive numbers. They mated, they called, they laid eggs in trees. Those eggs hatched and they fell to the ground. So I think 17 years from 2017, we very likely could have what would now be, brood 6 cicadas emerging here. So, and it's not just a one-time thing. So within the range of cicadas, there are some guys that are making the time jump, and then maybe 20 decades later, they make another time jump, either forward or backwards. So that's why you get these very funny distributions where you got a big pocket out here in kind of Ohio, you got one down here in North Carolina, and you got another one in the mid-Atlantic, because these guys are constantly time jumping 4 years or 1 year back and forth. So it's not just here's brood 10, here's brood 6, here's this one. But the broods do tend to be, the 4 year different ones seem to be adjacent to each other, and the 1 year time jumps. So if you had a brood 10 and it makes a 1 year, it becomes a brood 9, they tend to be adjacent too. So they tend to be in close proximity. It's a fascinating, look at those distribution maps. Go to Cicada Mania website and look at the distributions, and you can, there are also wonderful papers that talk about brood generation. So if you're really into this, dig in. But yeah.
And then Heidi, if we're on the broods, Heidi wants to know if the ones that disappeared are considered extinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nobody's seen brood 11 in Connecticut. I don't know when the last time it was seen, and nobody's seen brood 21 in Florida for a long time. But they were recorded, they were documented, but they're gone. And several local populations, I think in Connecticut, maybe Long Island and parts of New York, have where they recorded cicadas back from the the 1800s. We don't see them there anymore, which frankly is not surprising. They actually tried to establish, one of the cicada scientists tried to establish a population of cicadas on the National Mall. He basically brought down eggs. The eggs hatched, they dropped to the soil. And when the cicadas emerged, they were eaten into oblivion the next year. So it was proof of concept that predator satiation, if you're not out in big enough numbers, you're toast. That's that stabilizing selection. That's making sure everybody lockstep, prime numbered years. Yep.
And if landscapes have been treated for Japanese beetle grubs, will that kill the nymphs?
No idea.
Okay.
It probably depends what they were treated with. Remember, it has to get into the xylem tissue. Has to get into the xylem. So systemics, maybe some of the neonicotinoids. I don't think we have enough data to be able to, that would be an interesting data set to look at, but I don't know anybody that's collecting that data right now.
And one more, Michael, who works over at Oregon Ridge, he's planning some educational programs for kids and families, and he wanted to know what's the best time of the day. Is it morning, noon, evening to plan the programs around for cicadas?
I don't know what the story was at Oregon Ridge. Maybe is Michael still on? I don't see him on my screen. Is Michael still here?
Yeah, he's on still.
Can you unmute Michael?
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Hey, did Oregon Ridge have him in 04?
I remember. I live about 5 minutes away, 10 minutes away, and we had them pretty bad here at my house.
Okay.
I do remember. I think the 10 year or the 17 years prior to that, driving down 83. And
oh yeah.
Super noisy then.
Yep.
Pretty sure that we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be any time. I mean, if you want to see him up and out of the ground, again, I would start looking pretty carefully probably, I've got a couple of film crews coming in from England that want to film some of this stuff. And we're going to probably start about the first or second week of May looking and watching. You'll be able to see them, Michael. You know, the holes in the ground. If you go out, you can actually see the little cicadas. They're up there looking. I think they're measuring photo period just before they come up. But when on their thorax, when you see black patches on the thorax just behind their head, it means they're ready to go. If you dig them up right now, there are no black patches. Those are basically the mark I use to tell me that we're within days of them coming out. So if you wanted to have an adventure, certainly a nighttime adventure, keep an eye on it. That emergence from the ground will happen over the span of a few days, the massive synchronous up and out of the ground thing. So, you know, if you start to see them coming up, boom, that's kind of the next night would be the night you'd want to bring people in for the nighttime thing. That's going to go on for several days, though. So, you know, there'll certainly be like a 3-week window. You can watch them coming up out of the ground. You can see them on the trees. Then it's going to move up to the treetops. So, you know, down around, you know, the place down by your garden, you know, where you have your fence garden?
Yes.
Of course you do. That's a ridiculously stupid question. Of course you do.
I have a garden plot there, yeah.
All right, you know the meadow and it's bordered by young trees?
Right.
That's where I would be taking the kids to look around, because the branches are going to be low enough there that the kids should be able to see them courting and mating and laying eggs there. But they're going to be, if they're there, they're going to be all over the boles of those trees, shedding their skins and being eaten to death by predators and unfortunate situations. And then later you'll see the ones with massive spora walking around. So you'll have a couple weeks to figure it out.
So maybe start around mid-May planning and plan a couple like evening hikes. I did photograph some at my house in 2017. I got some really amazing shots. I put some boards out by my shed and they started climbing up them and got them coming out and shedding. And
cool.
So
very cool.
Certain time of night would you suggest, like maybe just right after sunset?
Dusk.
Dusk, okay.
That little clip I showed you of the cicada coming up out of the hole, you know, the ode to joy there was, yeah, I was out in Rockville, and somebody told me they were up and out, and I got out there around sunset, you know, I don't know, it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock, and the light was still good enough to shoot video. So yeah, somewhere right around there, dusk. It'll go deep into the night though. I mean, I filmed with Nat Geo. We started at sunset and we probably were filming till 2 in the morning. They were still coming up out. So there'll be hours and hours you can do this. And I'm just going to put this out there. I'm teaching a graduate course right now. Me and Paula Shrewsbury are teaching a course. We've got 8 grad students, and part of one of the things they're need to do to complete their credit is to do an outreach event. And if you have or would like somebody to come out and be a docent with you on one of these adventures, we can probably hook that up for you.
That'd be great. How best to set that up? Just send you an email through your website, or? Yeah,
just you know, mraupp@umd.edu. I'm pretty easy to get. You know, your crew, I'm up there often talking to your master naturalist. So the ladies in the office can help you with that.
Okay, sounds great.
They got me, yeah.
All right, I think we've covered every question. I have one of my own though. I have chickens and turkeys, and I'm excited for them.
They're gonna love it.
And I was wondering, can I collect a whole bunch of them and maybe freeze them and have them for later on in the fall for them to eat? I mean, or is it just this one-time thing?
You can do anything you like. There's a Frenchman that we was included in one of our Nat Geo specials, who collects them and he stores them in his freezer for 17 years. And he brings a little Tupperware out every year and has his cicada delight once a year, every year, marking the 17 years. You can do it. Yeah, sure. It's great fun. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's okay. The little dent you're going to make with your guinea fowl and your chickens, you know, I hope it doesn't extirpate your population, but I think there'll be enough around that it'll be okay if we all snack on a few. We don't want to overindulge, but I think there'll be enough to have a few for everybody.
Okay. All right. Anybody other have questions? I think we've covered it all from head to abdomen and everything in between. Thank you so much, Mike. We're all excited about spring now for another reason, and we can't wait. Everybody, thanks for sharing this evening with us. Remember, it's every Thursday night. Come and learn from us. And you did do a great job. You said that you felt a little bit of pressure, but if I look at everybody, they do look smarter than they did before you started. So we've accomplished our goal, and now you can take this knowledge and share it with other people and spread the smartness around, because that's what we need is more intelligent people in the world. And I hope that you share this with other people. Consider becoming a member, buy a raffle ticket, support the Natural History Society of Maryland, and come and join us again to learn some more. Thank you, Mike. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks for letting me join you in your homes this evening. Enjoy those cicadas. It's going to be great.
That was a lot of fun.